Welcome to episode 2 of the Panic Room podcast. Podcast, YouTube series, I don't really know, but thanks to everybody that supported the first episode. This second episode is recorded on my desktop setup that I use when I work from home. So I'm using an actual headset. Voice and sound quality will probably sound better. It'll just capture one thing is that if I lean back in my chair, the squeak will probably come through there. But based off of Instagram close friends poll, the topic that was chosen for this second Yap session is the grass is always greener on the other side. So, grass is always greener on the other side is I think it's like an idiom or whatever, where the idea is that if you have your lawn and then you look at someone else's lawn, that lawn will always seem like it's better or greener from a distance. But the idea of the idiom is just to emphasize that at the end of the day, things might look better from a distance, but until you actually go and experience and live on that grass, you will not realize the nuance of circumstance that might make it maybe not as great, and maybe your own grass is actually good as it is. So, what exactly do I want to talk about today on this episode? I want to talk about how traveling and experiencing different worlds and cultures can really reshape your perspective. And this topic came up because for me, I was born in Newark, New Jersey. I moved to East Brunswick when I was 3, stayed in East Brunswick until 2007 when I graduated from high school, and I ended up going to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor for college. And then I stayed in Michigan from 2007 until I moved back to New Jersey in 2022. So, roughly 15 years in a different state. Now I'm living my life again here in New Jersey. As a 37-year-old person, that's pretty interesting. Like, close to half of my quote unquote conscious life in a different state, a different region. And I think just due to circumstance, I've met some people here in New Jersey and they have literally never moved. They've never experienced anything outside of New Jersey as a whole. And I think it's just very thoughtful as a whole to kind of just talk through this idea of what happens when you are able to experience other situations and other circumstances, and just how much and just how narrow-minded oftentimes our own personal worldviews are, because we just think certain things are normal just because that's just how it always has been in our own lives. I'm not trying to come off as an arrogant slash I know better than you type of stance. I think it's something that I've just come to realize, and I just want to use this episode to kind of just talk through some of the things that I've kind of experienced, or things that like really changed my worldview just through these different experiences. And when it comes to this idea of just kind of like grass is always greener on the other side, it doesn't just relate with the state or the region that you grow up in. It makes a really big difference in other things as well. You can think of it as vocations. For some people, they've only worked at one company all of their lives, and then they assume in their minds this is just how corporate, or this is how companies just work, but they have nothing else to base it off of. Or they start looking at other companies, they're like, oh, like it'd be so much better if I worked there, but then there's those assumptions that come from there. This can apply to church settings too. Oftentimes, many people really only experience one type of church in a lot of their lives, and they assume that the way that things are done, like, oh, worship is always done a certain way, Bible study and sermons are always done a certain way. And then it's easy just to be like, oh, like if you see other churches or other places, you're just like, oh, it's not like my home, or it's not like what it was before. And I think that can cause you just to become very narrow minded and oftentimes displaced. Sometimes you are actually correct though, in terms of like, oh, like I prefer a certain way, but I think it's very important just to realize that just because you've only experienced one thing doesn't mean that that's the norm or that's the gold standard as a whole. Also, can think of it as just the idea of just living in different countries too. I think it's always like, oh, well, in Europe they do this, or in Canada they do this, but day to day, there's certain things that probably you just don't even realize whenever you would be living in those places. Like for me, it's like, okay, well, if I really have a really huge issue with my health, I can get a specialist, and sure, I have to pay more for it, but maybe it'll be quicker. Maybe I'll get the attention I need very quick, things like that. Again, this concept as a whole can relate to a lot of different types of dimensions or different types of like characteristics, but I'll focus kind of more on just what I've experienced in my life and kind of go from there. So, again, apologies if this episode is a little sloppy and disorganized. This is only episode 2 for me. Maybe I was quick to judge when I thought that podcasting and yapping was a very lazy form of content. Um, these long forms of content actually do take a little bit of mindfulness and attentiveness to go through it. So, still learning, but yeah. Anyways, I did have someone mention to me that they were like, "Man, you have really white teeth." I attribute that to Sensodyne toothpaste. Not sponsored, but I gotta do a little plug on the podcast of that type of thing too. Um, but yeah, I have sensitive gums, so that's the reason why. I think I also use like some periodontal type of like thing too, which is like an experimental treatment, I think. But that is why my teeth are very white. Anyway, so uh, for me, I've always like at the end of the day, I think I really prefer East Coast New Jersey world. New Jersey might be more crowded, it might be more expensive, it might be meaner than the Midwest, but I kind of like that. I like that meanness. So, 2007, this is a very interesting thing. So, I know a lot of people in New Jersey. They always are like, at least for where when I went to East Brunswick High School. We had a lot of ambitions of wanting to go to Ivy Leagues or go to really nice schools, blah blah blah. And our local state schools are Rutgers or Princeton. So, uh, you know, let's be real here. Like, there's always the joke about how like Princeton's the tough one. But I ended up going to University of Michigan Ann Arbor. Pick up the U.S. College News, like U.S. colleges, best colleges for mechanical engineering. I'm good at math and physics. Let's go to Ann Arbor. Rolling admission. Go there. Easier times back then. So end up there, and it's interesting because a lot of people actually at Michigan and Michigan State are their state schools. So for them, going to Michigan was like just normal for them as a whole. And for me, it was fascinating because I'll be honest, those people that I met in those schools, I'm like, they're not that bright, relatively speaking. Like, I had classmates in East Brunswick that were definitely like sharper than them, but that's just the difference of the standards that were there. I think I'm not gonna say that Midwest is a little slower, but I think that there is an element of competitiveness that can come from a specific region, as people are going to try and go from out of state to go to those schools as a whole. Going to Michigan was also very fascinating because Michigan, I think a lot of schools are like this like that too, but Michigan has a very large international student population. So you have these really rich and really fortunate people, like kids that get sent to like live in luxury apartments because their parents just have so much money just to foot the bill for them to study abroad. And these people had very different lifestyles and very different standards of how things are done. Like, if they get into a little car accident, mommy and daddy just writes a little check for them to get a new car or whatever. That's the reality of the situation, and I'm not gonna blame or fault them. They had their own situations that they were in, but I think by going to Michigan, I really was able to experience a melting pot of different regions and different personalities and different people. For me, for instance, I am a my family, my parents are from Taiwan. I would consider myself well, I mean, growing up, so here's the interesting thing. Like, I didn't get a lot of ethnic pride instilled in me as a whole. If someone was to ask me the realities of Taiwan and China, like, I honestly don't really care that much. Like, don't tell anyone that. I mean, I don't really care that much about it, like, but it just wasn't part of my upbringing to be like that. But then I met some people that were from Taiwan that were super nationalistic about it. And it was very interesting for me to meet those types of people and to realize that as a whole. So let's continue to talk about just Michigan as a whole. You go to Michigan, you can make a left turn whenever you want. You don't have to do a little jug handle or like an all turns from the right. You just literally make your left turns from the left side. You don't have to pay for your tolls on your interstate, but as a result of that, you end up having to have really disgusting roads while you're driving in because of the cold Michigan winters and stuff like that. Like you have just potholes full because like rainfall or whatever or salt, it causes just to expand, crack, expand, crack, expand, crack, so you got to deal with that. Michigan public transportation actually was stifled quite a bit in Michigan. The reason is the main three automotive companies were like, we want people to buy cars, and that's actually caused it to be difficult for people that want to commute to certain places because they just did not build out the infrastructure for that. So um, you have, let me think, what else is there? Oh, you pump your own gas in Michigan. That's just normal. So like, again, like these are just things. People are just friendlier. People call grocery stores by adding an S to it. Like they would say, like for us, it's like, oh, like there's a place called Meyer, and people would say Myers. So like it's like I guess here it's like ShopRights or something like that. Uh, yeah. So when I went there, I was able to experience a different type of church. I was able to meet different types of people. I was able to see just different type of lifestyle as a whole. Cost of living was on the cheaper side as well. So I think it's interesting because like that Ann Arbor was just college life for me, and I think for me it was an exposure just to meet people from different backgrounds. I think it's like international students was a big one, but the church I went to, I actually got to meet a lot of different types of people as well. There was a lot of people that actually did like a conversations partner with like this association called the Michigan Language Center. You literally had people that maybe you had like Japanese automotive companies that would send workers that they have from Japan to the U.S. to work with their counterparts in the U.S. factories or whatever. And they would actually send them to the Michigan Language Center just to learn English. And people from my church maybe be engaged in conversations with people that never ever understood like the idea of religion because in those other countries religion might not be as common and it might not be as prevalent, and you just start talking to people and you just realize that like, oh, like they've never heard certain things before or the ways that they're culturally built or just their quote unquote their like they have just different morals or different worldviews as a whole. So um I think college was college. I met different people. I'm actually really thankful I got to know some people that were actually there. Like for instance, Detroit actually has a very large Latin American community, and I actually we our church actually did things where we actually would help out at a high school there, and then I actually got to hear stories from high school students where their parents were actually undocumented or something along those lines. Or I met people that like it's like their first time. Like I met college classmates that were like they were the first person in their family to actually go to college. And um again, when you start talking and having that type of perspective, like you just realize at the end of the day, like there is just so much that's different in terms of worldview and circumstances. A lot of Latin American families, they prioritize family, business, and support. So they'll have large families, and then they'll have like the children are meant to just be like, come support the restaurant, come support the shop, just stick around there. Again, just different environments, different worldviews, different cultures. Going to Detroit, I actually did get to experience a bit of like inner city ministry because in Detroit, I got to get to know quite a bit of people that were like just black community families, and also got to even just check out some black churches and just saw how they did worship, just how their style of different outreach was very, very mind blowing. Um, Even just realizing just kind of like again, this is not to be stereotypical, but it's just from my experience. Like for me, when I was growing up, I had people that maybe said like, oh, like these are the types of professions you should strive for, white collar types of jobs. But then some of the people that I met that were more inner city, they might say like, oh, like I know people that have YouTube pages that are like musical artists. and they're like, that's what I want to strive to be. That's their ceiling, or that's their idea of success, or that's their idea of just making it. And it's just so different. One thing that always sticks out to me too is also we hosted this thing where we actually taught English to illiterate adults. Um, there are adults that literally just cannot read English because they kind of just rush to work just to make ends meet, and then they never ever learn to read. But here's the thing, because they're so embarrassed and ashamed, they would just be a little belligerent when it's like, oh, like suppose there's a menu at a restaurant. They actually couldn't read that menu, but they were just kind of like asking demanding questions. They're like this, oh, like how much is this or what is that? They weren't saying it because they want to be difficult. They actually just were being defensive because they actually could not read the menu themselves. And they want to hide that by trying to be like more aggressive. I just want this, I just want that. Like they just can't read it. They have trouble reading things like their cell phone bills. They have question reading bills that may say that they're late for things. They just can't read. And that's just a very like these people don't even look like they look old and they look like they might understand how to read, but they can't read at all. Like and it's like a mixture of shame, it's a mixture of just like they're just like, oh, like I have to do this, like, and they're trying to hide it. And I think that's just fascinating to me because it's like almost like I just assume that people could read. I just assume that it's just like why, like, why not? Why wouldn't a person be able to read, or how can a person possibly be in their mid 40s and still not be able to read after living in this country? But that's the reality of the situation. I have a friend that teaches. He's in Taiwan and he's actually an English teacher there, and there's a huge difference between their public schools and their private schools there, or their Christian schools and their public schools. And that's where it's like kind of like okay, like there's a difference in these different world circumstances that are out there. I think that's what's very fascinating there too. But one thing I actually remember when I was actually doing that thing when I was helping the adult literacy program thing in Detroit was I remember somebody was explaining to them why they use Instacart or like DoorDash and things like that. Because for me, I always thought that like, oh, like aren't those luxury services to be able to have somebody go pick up your food or pick up your groceries? But they told me I don't have a license or I don't have a car. And having somebody do this is cheaper than me waiting for the bus and having to carry all the groceries on the bus. And when I realized that, it's like, wow, this is actually a service and a need that's needed by people that maybe are actually less fortunate because they actually don't have a car, they don't have a license. Same thing goes with even the idea of like learning more about undocumented people and just how things like the real ID affects them. The real ID, you just think to yourself like, oh, it's just a way to get a golden star on your license. But the real ID actually is a way to target undocumented people and try and take away their ability to use airplanes to travel domestically. Sometimes people that are undocumented have trouble getting a driver's license. And if the real ID has a lot more specifications for it, you're taking away the ability to use to domestically fly by adding this barrier of the real ID. And again, you would not realize some of these things that are occurring until you actually meet and talk to people from those other environments and from those other different experiences as a whole. Um, for me, also, my work experiences, I was able to grow just more empathy of different situations as well. In Detroit, I worked for a healthcare system, and there they had things related to like operating room and things like that. And again, something related to actually adult literacy came up where if somebody got instructions what they were supposed to do before a surgery, they actually had to make a process change where nurses had to give a phone call and read the instructions to the person out loud instead of assuming that they could read the instructions. Because many of the patients that were maybe going to the Detroit hospitals didn't actually have the ability to read what was in the instructions, so they might eat before their surgery, and then as a result, they have to cancel the surgery on the day of, or so on and so forth. Or they have to make sure that they had to arrange an Uber for them so that they would have transportation to arrive and also to leave the hospital as well. Again, all of these are just things related to perspective as a whole. And the reason I want to talk about this topic is because one thing I've kind of realized as I've moved back here now to New Jersey, is that some of the people I meet here, they've actually never ever lived life outside of New Jersey. And I know people have circumstances and reasons why, but my challenge is to just really evaluate and consider that maybe the things that you think are normal are actually not the norm for everyone around you. Just because you've always grown up in a specific church and you assume that that church does things the only way does not mean that's the only way that's out there. Um, Same thing goes. It can be very easy just to be critical of just the way things are in your circumstance, in your situation, but that doesn't mean that other places do it better or that other places have it right either. You might just stroll somewhere else and just realize, wow, this is a lot worse, or like, wow, this is a lot different. And different might not be bad actually, but I think it is just very interesting to think through that as a whole. But yeah, I think the reason I wanted to do this topic was I think that I don't know, like I said in the first episode, I have a really good memory and I've just been able to have an abundance of experiences of talking to different people. Um, I'm not the expert of every single experience out there, but I've definitely been humbled in my perspective and my ability to just assume different things. I think it's very easy just to be comfortable and just to imagine like what would make sense in my mind and in my paradigm. But then you start to take a step back and you realize, oh wow, like things are different in different places. And I'm actually really thankful that I was able to actually go to Michigan, but also very thankful I was able to experience life in Detroit and befriend people of different backgrounds and cultures. You know what's actually really funny? Um, some of these neighborhoods in Detroit, the reason there's a lot of these fish fry restaurants is because what they do is that they'll sell fish but charge a frying fee. And that way they can become like a grocery store, and a grocery store accepts food stamps or EBT types of things. And then that's why there's so many of them, because the population that might be there maybe on EBT or food stamps, and then they can use their funds to purchase fish and pay the frying fee, and it becomes something that they can charge, and then they can actually use the funds for that thing as well. It's similar to how some Korean beauty supply shops will build their stores in certain neighborhoods, because when it comes to things like Easter or these other things, a lot of people will come and buy wigs or other things like that. Again, it's fascinating to realize just that dynamic that's there, but then you just don't realize it until you actually meet or just see what's happening in those places as a whole. But yeah, I think it's yeah, I mean, I can make jokes about things like, oh, like being able to pump your own gas, making the left turn on Michigan, not having to pay tolls for your um, travel. But yeah, I think it's important just to be humble. I say I'm a very arrogant and cocky person, but I'm thankful that I've been able to grow humble just because I've been able to just get to know different people. And I think that's why I really encourage people to also speak up if you just have a different opinion or different perspective, because some people really just don't know any better. And it's not because they're ignorant, it's just that they never had the exposure. And I think we can all play a part in just being able to share that. I know for me, as a person that's Chinese, I think there's certain things that I experience in certain environments that make it so that it's hard for some people to understand. Like culturally speaking, like I may be in certain environments where there might be a lot of Korean people, and there's certain things that just are not very normal to me just because it's different from the culture that I grew up in. But unless I speak up and say something about it, I can't just immediately blame them for being quote unquote exclusive or whatever. But yeah, grass is always greener on the other side. I'm not trying to actually sell this idea that you gotta just change and just go everywhere else. It's more about just the idea of just being aware that just because you see something on the other side and it looks greener doesn't mean it's better. But also, I do encourage people just to take the time to actually go touch different types of grass. Touch the grass that looks greener. Touch, like, exit your own lawn. And maybe you don't have the chance just due to circumstance. You have to live at home. You have to live in the place that you are at. But I think that you can learn a lot by just connecting with different people. And I think that's the thing that's really amazing about how when you're able to not only connect with people, but when you're able to bridge that relationship despite those differences. Maybe you won't agree on everything. Well, the reality is you're not going to agree on everything. But I think there is an amazingness that can come from just the let's try and understand each other and at least try to have the empathy to see what's going on in the other person's life. So, yeah, I mean, I just wanted to do this episode mainly just to kind of talk about this thing that I realized because I think it's just so unique to me because when I meet some people here that have never ever left the state of New Jersey, I'm just like, oh, that's so interesting that you've never met or experienced something different. You've never ever drank like a Verner's ginger soda. You've never ever tried In and Out. This I got that whenever I traveled for different places. You never went to Japan and seen that the portion sizes for things are so much smaller. Things like that. I think it's when you have that type of ability to experience new things, I think it really enriches your life as a whole. But again, thanks for listening to me yap. I think the sound quality is better with this headset. We'll see if I keep doing this. This actually was, I don't know, I'm not really satisfied with the quality of today's talk. I think it's because there was just a lot to cover, and I think it was just hard to just do it all off the rip. And that's just something I'm not used to doing long form content with. And I'm too lazy to edit and to like do multiple takes of things. But we'll see. Hopefully this worked out still. But yeah, thanks to all the people that have been listening, and yeah, maybe there'll be an episode 3. Thanks again. See ya.